Surely 9 out of 10 people would say that Peppa Pig was one of the cartoons that defined their childhood. But do you and all those people know how Peppa often did terrible things that we didn't even notice at the time? In the episode where several of Peppa's friends are at her house playing, we see that the little pig pretends that Teddy is a police officer, and he ends up locking all of her friends' toys in a toy prison. Although it was part of the game, she simply locks up all the toys of all the kids, and only she is left with her toy. It's clear that Peppa doesn't care about her friends' feelings or whether they'll continue playing, as long as she keeps her own toy. Besides her friends, many other characters have suffered from Peppa's lack of consideration and even lies. Check out with us now all the most terrible things the world's most famous animated pig has ever done. So get ready, because Cinewave is starting another episode! One of the times Peppa was cruel involved one of her favorite victims, Daddy Pig. On the day Peppa and George are playing picnic in their backyard, just before it starts to rain, their parents call them inside, and Peppa forgets her teddy. When she realizes her favorite doll is missing, Daddy Pig runs out to get it and comes back completely soaked and out of breath, as he had to run in the rain and lightning that could have struck him and taken his life. When he arrives back home, we see that Peppa doesn't care at all about her dad's situation and only worries about Teddy, which according to her, is wet. She simply pretends her dad didn't do anything, completely disregarding his effort. Daddy Pig definitely deserved a bit more appreciation, don't you think? And apparently, Daddy Pig isn't the only one Peppa doesn't care about or show consideration for. When she is at the museum with her whole pig family, she sees a replica of the Queen of England's crown and imagines herself as the Queen of Chocolate Cake. In this same thought, we can see that she likes the idea of even her parents and brother calling her Your Majesty and treating her like royalty, just like anyone else. Okay, this wasn't an action, but just a thought. Still, we can say that this character truly loves herself more than anyone else. Some might call that selfishness. In one of the episodes of the Pink Piglet show, Daddy and Mummy Pig have to go out for the night and ask Peppa and George's grandparents to take care of them and put them to bed. The problem is that Peppa thought this was the perfect time to misbehave, knowing her parents wouldn't be home. She then encourages George not to fall asleep and to play inside the bedroom, something they wouldn't do when their parents put them to bed. The two elderly grandparents hear the noise and go upstairs to see what's going on. When Peppa realizes they're about to come in, she makes George lie down and pretend he's asleep, intentionally deceiving their grandparents. So as the older and supposedly more responsible sibling, Peppa not only encouraged George to do something wrong, but also got him to lie to their grandparents on purpose. Many might think this is just a childish prank, but we can confirm that lying and disobeying your parents and grandparents is something that shouldn't be done. Peppa definitely messed up this time as well. Shortly after this moment, the kids come downstairs and tell their grandparents they aren't sleepy. They then ask Grandpa to play the game of throwing them up in the air. It's fine for George, who's smaller and lighter, but Peppa is a big, heavier child. But even so, she insists that the elderly man keep playing. We can see that he himself mentions that it feels like she's gotten heavier, which is probably true, and besides, he's certainly gotten older too. We can see that he's out of breath and making a face that says he can't take it anymore. When Grandma Pig notices this, she comments that Grandpa might be too tired for the game, and Peppa responds that she knows this with a smile on her face.
Maybe Grandpa Pig is a bit tired.
I know.
This shows that not only is she aware that the old man is at his limit, but she just doesn't care. When I saw this scene, I was honestly shocked at how Peppa only thinks about herself. And if you love Peppa Pig too, even when she's not always a good kid, leave a comment below with #pink, which is the color of the pig family. In the episode Susie Goes Away, we see that Peppa really seems sad, but she doesn't let go of her cruel behavior. As she and her little sheep friend are saying goodbye, Peppa casually mentions that she'll miss Susie being bossy with her. Immediately, Peppa's best friend gets upset and stands up, as Peppa directly insulted her. Of course, in the end, they make up since Susie was going away, but this doesn't change the fact that Peppa was really mean with her words, especially knowing that they might never see each other again. In the same episode, we see that Peppa gives her plastic crown to Susie as a gift, supposedly forever. But shortly after, Mummy Sheep gets a phone call informing her that Susie wouldn't be moving abroad after all. Immediately, Peppa asks for her crown back since Susie wasn't leaving anymore, taking back her gift. It seems Peppa doesn't know that once you give someone a gift, you can't just take it back. This is really wrong, and that's exactly what Peppa did. The latest Peppa Pig movie, Cinema Party, definitely had its main plot revolve around Mr. Bull and Mrs. Cow's wedding. Mummy Pig and Peppa accompany their friend to a fabric shop and help her choose the yellow fabric for her wedding dress, which the future Mrs. Bull tried on and loved. The problem is that shortly after, we see Peppa playing with the scissors inside the shop, and when the employee gets distracted, Peppa accidentally cuts up Mrs. Cow's wedding dress, literally turning it into Swiss cheese. Luckily, Mrs. Cow ended up loving it because she adores cheese, but this could have totally ruined the wedding and turned everything into a disaster. At least this time, we can say she wasn't the only one at fault. When Madame Gazelle's class goes on a trip to a toothbrush and toothpaste factory, they are greeted by Miss Rabbit, who, of course, works there as well, besides her other 999 jobs. Peppa notices that George wants a toothbrush and toothpaste for himself. She then tells him not to worry because they will all be getting a goodie bag full of treats, as if she worked there herself. Right after saying this in front of everyone, we can see Miss Rabbit gets quite startled, feels super embarrassed, and sneaks off to prepare dental care kits for all the kids. We can see that Peppa has no problem making people uncomfortable and putting them in really awkward situations. In another episode, we once again see Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig putting their two kids to bed. Daddy Pig sits down to tell them a bedtime story. As soon as he announces that the story is called The Sleepy Princess, Peppa interrupts him before he even begins, saying the story is boring even though Daddy Pig had never told it before. This makes it clear something we've all suspected. Peppa really seems to have something against her own dad. That's why parodies like Peppa Pig were created, where Peppa and her dad are mortal enemies. After this, Peppa keeps interrupting her dad until her own mother asks her to let Daddy Pig tell the story.
Peppa, if you keep talking, Daddy Pig can't start the story.
Finally, someone put Peppa in her place. Well done, Mommy Pig. And if you enjoy animated cartoons and movies, the best thing you can do right now is to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos. In another episode, we see Peppa pulling off a series of not-so-nice actions. First, she and George start fighting stubbornly over the TV remote. Keep in mind, George is practically a baby, and Peppa, being older, should have had the maturity to talk it out with him instead of practically breaking the remote in half. Next, she and George fight over a carrot during lunch in the same way they did with the remote. But this time it's even worse because Peppa throws a plate of food which ends up landing right on her own dad's head. Seriously, who does that to their own father? This was definitely very, very wrong on Peppa's part. In one of the episodes of the Pink Piglet show, the pig family goes on holiday to Italy, where it's sunny, unlike Peppa's hometown, which is rainy. During these days, Grandma and Grandpa Pig stay home, taking care of Goldie, the family's pet goldfish. When they all return, Peppa notices her goldfish has grown a lot bigger because her grandparents gave him plenty of food. Instead of thanking her grandparents for feeding the pet, she makes a dissatisfied face and complains to her granddad. I think saying a simple thank you wouldn't have hurt, and it would have shown at least a little bit of gratitude for the favor they did for her and the family. Peppa can be really arrogant sometimes. In the episode where George is learning to use the potty, since he's still a baby, Peppa, in front of Susie and her mother, looks down at her little brother and cruelly says with a mean look on her face that he's terrible at using the potty. That was totally unnecessary, and just another mean comment from the character. We're wrapping up our list today of Peppa and her not-so-admirable behaviors that happen from time to time. If you want to keep on having fun, it's simple. Click on one of the two videos popping up on your screen. See you in the next video!